People always assumed a man like him would fall for the most beautiful woman in the room. They never imagined he'd choose the one everyone else refused to see. The smell of burnt coffee and sizzling bacon had settled into my clothes so deeply that even my tiny apartment carried it home with me every night. By the time my shift reached its 10th hour, my feet throbbed with every step across the worn black and white tiles of Rosewood Diner, a little place tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop on the edge of Brooklyn. I was 28 years old, broke enough to calculate every gallon of milk before putting it into my shopping cart, and invisible enough that most customers never bothered reading the name stitched above my apron. Emily. To them, I was simply the chubby waitress. Or, depending on the table, the big one. Ask her for extra fries. She probably knows which are best. The jokes were never original. They were simply delivered by different mouths. I smiled anyway. Because tips paid rent. Because my mother's heart medication wasn't going to buy itself. Because pride didn't keep the lights on. The breakfast rush had finally faded when the little bell above the diner door chimed again. Cold autumn air drifted inside. I looked up automatically. 4 men entered. Dark tailored coats. Expensive leather shoes untouched by the puddles outside. The kind of people who looked completely out of place beneath faded neon signs and cracked vinyl booths. The man walking in the center barely glanced around. Tall. Broad shoulders. Perfect posture. Dark blonde hair brushed neatly back. Blue eyes so calm they reminded me of winter lakes just before the ice formed. He wasn't handsome in the cheerful movie star kind of way. He looked dangerous in the quietest possible way. The other 3 scanned every corner before allowing themselves to breathe. Security. Without uniforms. I grabbed 4 menus. Good morning, I said with my usual practice smile. Table for 4? The tallest man looked at me for exactly 2 seconds. Not at my stomach. Not at my cheeks. Not at the way my apron stretched across my body. Just at me. Please. 1 word. Low. Controlled. I led them toward the booth beside the window. Outside, gray clouds swallowed what little sunlight October still offered. Inside, the coffee machine hissed behind the counter while an old country song drifted softly from the radio. Simple. Ordinary. Safe. Or at least it had been. A little boy suddenly burst through the front door before I could pour their coffee. Maybe 6 years old. Crying. His tiny jacket soaked from the rain. Daisy! He screamed. My puppy! Everyone turned. Cars sped past outside, tires slicing through puddles. Across the street, a frightened golden puppy had wandered into traffic, frozen beneath the sound of blaring horns. Without thinking, I dropped the coffee pot onto the counter. I'll be right back. The cook yelled something behind me. I never heard it. I rushed outside, rain immediately soaking my hair. The puppy trembled in the middle of the road. A delivery van rounded the corner much faster than it should have. The driver leaned on the horn. People screamed. I didn't think. I ran. Cold water splashed around my shoes as I reached the trembling puppy and scooped it against my chest. The van skidded. Its tires shrieked across wet asphalt. For one terrifying heartbeat, I saw nothing except 2 glaring headlights. Strong hands wrapped around my arm. Someone pulled me backward with surprising force. The van roared past close enough that its side mirror brushed the sleeve of my sweater. My knees nearly buckled. I looked up. Those same blue eyes stared back at me. Calm. Unshaken. The tall stranger hadn't let go of my arm. Either of us spoke. The little boy crashed into my side, hugging both me and his muddy puppy while sobbing with relief. You saved her, he cried. I smiled through my racing heartbeat and gently ruffled his wet hair. She just wanted to go home. The stranger watched the scene without saying a word. His gaze shifted from the puppy to the grateful child, then back to me. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not admiration. Not pity. Recognition. As though he'd spent years searching for something without knowing what it looked like until this exact moment. One of the suited men approached quietly. "Sir, we're already late." The stranger never looked away from me. "No," he answered. His voice remained almost unnaturally calm. "We're exactly where we need to be." For reasons I couldn't explain, every instinct in my body whispered the same impossible thought. My ordinary life had just ended. I simply didn't know it yet. I should have forgotten him the moment he walked out of the diner. Men like that didn't belong in stories like mine. They belonged in newspapers, boardrooms, or whispered rumors people exchanged after midnight. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Customers came and went. Coffee cups emptied. The lunch crowd slowly replaced breakfast. Yet every few minutes, I caught myself glancing toward the front door, half expecting those icy blue eyes to appear again. They never did. By 6 that evening, my back felt like it was carrying the entire building. I untied my faded apron, counted my tips twice, and sighed. $114. Not terrible. Not enough. It never was. The October wind bit through my sweater as I stepped outside with a paper grocery bag tucked beneath one arm. Milk. Bread. Generic cereal. My mother's prescription filled nearly half the bag, costing more than everything else combined. Brooklyn after sunset always looked tired. Street lights buzzed overhead. Subway trains rattled in the distance. Life kept moving because it couldn't afford to stop. Neither could I. My apartment building stood 6 blocks away. Old brick. Broken elevator. Peeling paint. The landlord called it vintage. Everyone else called it falling apart. I had barely reached the front entrance when I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Perfectly polished. Engine idling. It looked absurd beside rusted sedans and delivery vans. I kept walking. Not my business. Inside, the hallway smelled of old pipes and bleach. Mrs. Carter from apartment 3B smiled as she struggled with 2 grocery bags. I hurried over. "Let me help." "Oh, Emily, sweetheart, you're an angel." "No," I laughed softly. "Just someone with free hands." She chuckled as we climbed the stairs together. "You work too hard." "I know. You need someone to take care of you." I smiled without answering. People loved saying things like that. Nobody ever volunteered. After settling her groceries inside, I continued upstairs to my tiny apartment. The moment I unlocked the door, my phone rang. County Memorial Hospital. My heart tightened instantly. "Mom?" A nurse answered instead. "Ms. Brooks? Your mother had another episode this afternoon." The room spun. "Is she?" "She's stable." Stable. The most terrifying, comforting word in the English language. "Her cardiologist recommends a new treatment." "How much?" Silence. Then, "Approximately $78,000 before insurance." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because crying would have taken too much energy. "I understand," I whispered. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my old couch and stared at the peeling wallpaper until darkness swallowed the apartment. $78,000. I couldn't earn that in years. A knock interrupted my thoughts. 3 slow knocks. Measured. Confident. No neighbor knocked like that. I opened the door halfway. The man standing outside wore a charcoal suit. Mid-40s. Perfect posture. Expressionless. Behind him waited 2 more men. And beyond them, the same black SUV. "Ms. Emily Brooks?" "Yes?" "My employer wishes to speak with you." "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong apartment. We never make that mistake." His voice remained calm. Professional. Like he'd rehearsed every word. "I'm not interested in buying anything. It's not a sales visit. I don't owe anyone money." "No." A slight pause. "Our employer owes you his time." Before I could answer, another car door opened. My heartbeat slowed and accelerated at exactly the same moment. The tall man from the diner stepped onto the sidewalk. Same dark overcoat. Same impossibly calm expression. Same eyes. He crossed the cracked pavement without hurry. The suited men instinctively stepped aside. Power didn't need to announce itself. It simply arrived. He stopped a few feet away. Rain began falling again. Soft at first. Almost gentle. "You risked your life today," he said. "I saved a puppy. You saved a child." I frowned. The puppy belonged to the child. His lips almost curved into a smile. Almost. "I've spent years watching people," he said quietly. "Most only move when something benefits them. And you moved before you had time to think. I don't understand." "I know." He reached inside his coat. Every instinct screamed at me to step back. Instead, he removed a simple cream-colored envelope. No logo. No markings. He held it toward me. "I'd like you to read this. I don't take money from strangers." "It's not money." "What is it?" "The opportunity to change both our lives." The rain grew heavier between us. Cars hissed along the wet street. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed across Brooklyn. I looked from the envelope to the stranger, then back again. "What exactly do you want from me?" For the first time since I'd met him, his answer came without hesitation. "I need a wife." The envelope suddenly felt heavier than anything I had ever held. People think impossible decisions happen after days of careful thought. Mine happened while standing barefoot in my apartment doorway, holding an envelope that suddenly felt heavier than my entire future. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The words sounded ridiculous even to my own ears. The tall man never blinked. "I haven't." Rain drummed softly against the rusted fire escape outside my window. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked before disappearing into the evening traffic. The world kept moving while mine stood perfectly still. "I don't know your name," I said. He extended one hand. "Damian Carter." His handshake was firm. Controlled. The kind of handshake that belonged to someone who never questioned whether people would trust him. "I've never met anyone named Damian Carter." "No. You've only met the man who walked into your diner." There was something strangely honest about the way he said it. No arrogance. No smile. Just certainty. "I'm Emily Brooks." "I know." Of course he did. The realization made my stomach tighten. "You investigated me." "I did." "Why?" "Because I don't make important decisions without facts." I looked down at the cream-colored envelope still resting in my hands. "What is this?" "A contract." "I figured that much." "A marriage contract." I almost laughed. Instead, I handed it back. "I'm not marrying a complete stranger." "You won't be." "I don't even know what you do for a living." His expression never changed. "I manage several businesses." One of the suited men behind him shifted almost imperceptibly. "Businesses?" "Sure." Normal businessmen didn't travel with armed bodyguards. Normal businessmen didn't seem capable of making an entire street feel silent simply by standing there. "I appreciate whatever this is," I said carefully, "but I'm going inside." His next sentence stopped me before I reached the door. "County Memorial called you an hour ago." Every muscle in my body froze. "My mother's treatment." I slowly turned back. "You need $78,000. I stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I told you." "I investigated." Anger replaced confusion so quickly it surprised me. "You had absolutely no right." "No. I didn't. But I did it anyway." I stepped toward him. For the first time in years, I didn't care how large I looked or how ridiculous I might seem. "You don't get to walk into my life and read it like a newspaper." "I already have." "You don't know anything about me." "I know you work 12-hour shifts. I know you volunteer every Sunday at St. Matthew's Soup Kitchen. I know your landlord hasn't repaired your heating system in 2 winters. I know you haven't bought yourself new shoes in 3 years. I know every extra dollar you've earned has gone toward keeping your mother alive." Each sentence landed like another stone dropped into still water. Not because they were wrong, Because they were all true. You followed me. No. I observed you. That's somehow worse. A faint breeze carried the scent of rain and wet concrete between us. Damian remained completely unmoved. I need someone people won't expect. What does that even mean? I need a wife who can't be bought. You think I'm poor enough to qualify? I think you're honest enough. The answer caught me off guard. For a second. Only a second. I almost believed him. Then common sense returned. This is insane. It is. I'm not interested. You haven't read the contract. I don't need to. You'll receive $2 million. My heart skipped. Not because I wanted the money. Because it was more money than I had ever imagined existing in one place. Half upon signing. The remaining half after 1 year. I shook my head. No amount of money is worth selling my life. It's not your life. It's 1 year. 1 year pretending to be my wife. And after that? You walk away. No obligations. No contact. No strings. It sounded almost believable. Almost. Then I looked into those impossibly calm blue eyes again. People like Damian Carter didn't build fortunes by telling the whole truth. There was always another layer. Another reason. Another secret hidden beneath perfectly chosen words. I handed the envelope back one final time. I'm sorry. My answer is no. For the first time that evening, Damian looked disappointed. Not angry. Not offended. Simply disappointed. He accepted the envelope without argument. I expected that answer. Relief washed over me. Good. I'll return tomorrow. My relief disappeared instantly. Why? Because by then. He glanced briefly toward the hospital prescription bag still sitting on my kitchen table. Your situation will be very different. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned, climbed into the waiting SUV, and disappeared into the rain, leaving me with the uneasy certainty that whatever happened tomorrow had already begun. The hardest part wasn't saying no. It was wondering why a man who could have anyone in the world refused to accept my answer. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Damian Carter standing beneath the rain as though the storm belonged to him. By morning, exhaustion had settled behind my eyes like a permanent ache. I arrived at Rosewood Diner 20 minutes early. Routine helped. Coffee helped. Keeping my hands busy helped. Thinking did not. Morning, Emily. Martha, the cook, slid a fresh mug across the counter. You look awful. Thanks. I meant tired. I know. She leaned closer. Everything okay with your mom? I forced a smile. We're figuring things out. That answer had become my favorite lie. The breakfast rush arrived right on schedule. Construction workers. Taxi. Drivers. Office employees checking their watches every 30 seconds. For 3 straight hours, I almost convinced myself the strange proposal had never happened. Then the television mounted above the counter changed everything. Breaking news this morning. Nobody paid attention at first. The reporter continued. Philanthropist and billionaire businessman Damian Carter announced another major acquisition late last night. Every sound inside the diner seemed to disappear. My head snapped toward the screen. There he was. Perfectly tailored suit. Calm blue eyes. Standing in front of dozens of flashing cameras. Businessman? That part had been true. At least partly. The reporter continued speaking while images of skyscrapers, private aircraft, luxury hotels, and financial headlines filled the screen. One of the country's most influential business leaders. Estimated personal fortune exceeding $11 billion. Known for his unusually private lifestyle. The television never mentioned organized crime. It didn't have to. Power like that never needed labels. Now that's a man. One customer muttered. Another laughed. Guys like him marry movie stars. I looked away before anyone noticed my expression. By noon, I had almost convinced myself yesterday had been some bizarre misunderstanding. Until my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. Then again. Finally, I answered. Hello? Ms. Brooks. The same calm voice from yesterday. Damian's assistant. My employer would like 5 minutes of your time. My answer hasn't changed. He expected that response. Then why call? Because circumstances have changed. They haven't. They have. I almost hung up. Then he quietly added, County Memorial Hospital. Every muscle in my body tightened. What about it? Please check your voicemail. The call ended. Immediately. Without another word. Hands trembling, I opened my voicemail. There was only one new message. It had been left 23 minutes earlier. Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Reynolds from County Memorial. His voice sounded exhausted. We've reviewed your mother's latest test results. A pause. I'm afraid we can't safely postpone the procedure any longer. Another pause. If treatment isn't approved within 72 hours, her condition will become significantly more dangerous. The message ended. I stared at the screen until it blurred. 72 hours. Not months. Not weeks. 3 days. Martha noticed my face immediately. What happened? My mom. I couldn't finish. She hugged me without asking permission. I'll pray for her. So will I. But prayer didn't cost $78,000. Medicine did. The rest of my shift passed in complete silence. When closing time finally arrived, I walked outside into another gray evening. The black SUV was already waiting. Exactly where it had been yesterday. As if it had never left. Damian stepped out before I reached the sidewalk. He wasn't wearing a business suit this time. Only a dark wool coat. Simple. Elegant. The city seemed strangely quieter around him. I said no. I remember. You should respect that. I do. Then why are you here? He studied my face for several long seconds. Because I also know you. You don't know me. I know you'll sacrifice everything for someone you love. I hated how accurate that sounded. You don't get to use my mother. I'm trying to save her. No. I shook my head. You're trying to buy me. For the first time, something softened behind his blue eyes. No, Emily. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. I'm trying to convince the only woman I've met in years who cannot be bought. He reached into his coat again. This time, not with another envelope, but with a single hospital document. It was my mother's treatment estimate. Across the bottom, someone had stamped one impossible word in bold red letters. Paid. I stared at the page. Then at Damian. My heartbeat became deafening. I never signed anything. You didn't have to. I looked up in disbelief. Why would you do this? His answer came so quietly I almost missed it. Because I need you to believe that this marriage begins with a choice. Then he looked directly into my eyes. And now. He paused. The choice is finally yours. A signature can change your name in seconds. It can take much longer to change your heart. I stared at the words stamped across my mother's medical estimate. Paid. The red letters blurred as tears gathered in my eyes. I can't accept this. My voice barely sounded like my own. Damian didn't argue. I expected you to say that. I mean it. You do. He stood beneath the fading evening sky with the same impossible composure he always carried, as though nothing in the world had ever surprised him. I won't owe you. You won't. I can't be bought. I know. Then why did you pay it? His answer came without hesitation. Because your mother shouldn't lose time while we're discussing principles. I hated how reasonable that sounded. I hated that part of me wanted to thank him. Mostly. I hated that I couldn't hand the money back. You should have asked me first. If I had, you would have refused. You're right. I know. Silence settled between us. Cars drifted past on the rain-dark street. The city lights reflected across wet pavement like broken stars. Finally, I looked at him. What exactly do you get out of this marriage? For the first time, Damian didn't answer immediately. My family expects me to marry. So marry someone you love. I don't. Someone who loves you. They don't. The honesty caught me off guard. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything. His blue eyes remained fixed on mine. I require a wife the public can trust. Why me? Because you saved a child when everyone else froze. Anyone would have done that. No. His voice remained calm. They watched. You acted. I folded my arms. You've known me for 2 days. I've observed you for longer. That sentence should have frightened me. Instead, it made me curious. How long? 6 weeks. I blinked. You've been watching me for 6 weeks? I began after a charity event. What charity event? You served meals. I remembered. St. Matthew's Soup Kitchen. Every Sunday after church. The volunteers rotated constantly. Hundreds of faces. I never would have noticed his. You were there? I was. Wearing what? A baseball cap. I laughed once. Short. Disbelieving. So the billionaire served soup? The cameras had already left. I searched his face for sarcasm. There wasn't any. You saw me there. I saw you stay after everyone else went home. I was cleaning. You were comforting an elderly woman who had nowhere to sleep. I remembered her. Mrs. Alvarez. She had cried because the shelter was full. You remember that? I remember everything. The weight of those words lingered in the cool evening air. You still haven't answered my question. He nodded. The marriage protects my business. There it is. I knew there was another reason. It also protects you. I don't need protection. You don't know that. His tone changed. Only slightly. But enough for me to notice. There was something beneath the calm. Concern. Or perhaps fear. From what? I'll explain after you sign. I immediately shook my head. No. I won't agree to something I don't understand. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. The first negotiation. I'm serious. So am I. He reached into his coat and produced a slim black folder. Read every page. No pressure. No deadlines. If you decide no. He paused before finishing. I'll never ask again. I accepted the folder carefully. It felt surprisingly light. Inside were only a few pages. No impossible legal language. No hidden clauses. 1 year. Separate bedrooms. Complete financial independence. The freedom to leave after 12 months. Near the bottom, one sentence caught my attention. Either party may terminate the agreement if genuine affection develops between them. I looked up. What kind of contract includes that? The honest kind. I couldn't stop staring at the page. You actually think two strangers could fall in love? Damian held my gaze with quiet certainty. I think pretending is dangerous. Why? Because eventually. His voice softened almost into a whisper. People forget which parts were supposed to be fake. For reasons I couldn't explain, my heart skipped once. Not because I believed him. Because for the very first time, I wasn't completely sure I wanted to say no. Sometimes the most dangerous word in the English language isn't yes. It's the silence that comes before it. I didn't sign the contract that night. I read it. Twice. Then a third time after midnight. Every page looked almost disappointingly simple. 1 year. 1 public marriage. Separate bedrooms. No physical obligations. Financial independence. Freedom to walk away. The agreement looked less like a trap and more like something written by a man terrified of becoming one. That was what unsettled me. Nothing about Damian Carter matched the stories powerful men usually wrote. At 7 the next morning, I visited my mother before work. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fresh flowers. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, drawing pale lines across her blanket. She smiled the moment she saw me. My favorite girl. I bent down and kissed her forehead. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday. She studied my face for a long moment. But not as well as you. Moms always know. We're paid to. I laughed softly before helping her sit up. Then I noticed the chart hanging beside her bed. The surgery had been scheduled. Tomorrow morning. I stared at the date. They approved it? The hospital called before breakfast. She reached for my hand. They said an anonymous donor covered everything. Anonymous. I almost smiled. He must be a wonderful man. My chest tightened. If only it were that simple. She tilted her head. What do you mean? For the first time in my life, I told my mother everything. The diner. The proposal. The contract. The billionaire. The fake marriage. When I finally finished, silence filled the room. She didn't panic. She didn't judge. She simply looked out the window for several seconds. Then she asked one question. Did he ever lie to you? I don't know. Did you catch him lying? No. Did he pressure you? He kept asking. That's different. She squeezed my fingers gently. Emily, I didn't raise you to fear difficult choices. I raised you to recognize kind people wearing unusual clothes. I frowned. Kind people don't investigate strangers. No. They investigate people they intend to trust. That wasn't the answer I expected. What if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life? She smiled sadly. Sweetheart, the biggest mistakes usually come from the chances we refuse to take. An hour later, I walked out of the hospital carrying more questions than answers. The black SUV was waiting across the street. Of course it was. Damian stood beside it, hands tucked into the pockets of his dark coat. You knew I'd come here. I hoped. You always seem to know where I am. I know what's important to you. I crossed my arms. My mother likes you. A genuine look of surprise crossed his face. She's never met me. Apparently she doesn't think that's necessary. For the first time, Damian actually laughed. It wasn't loud. It lasted barely a second. But it transformed his entire face. The cold businessman disappeared. In his place stood a man who looked almost human. I've never heard that before. I can believe it. His smile faded naturally. No decision today. I know. I still have questions. I'll answer every one I can. What happens if the press discovers we're pretending? They won't. You sound awfully confident. I've spent my life planning for impossible situations. I looked directly into his eyes. And what happens if one of us actually falls in love? He became very still. The city noise seemed to fade around us. When the contract was written, he said quietly, my attorneys wanted to remove that clause. You didn't let them. No. Why? Because I refused to build a marriage. He paused, choosing each word with care. That becomes a prison. I searched his face again. No manipulation. No performance. Only certainty. I slowly reached into my bag. The contract rested inside, neatly folded. Damian didn't move. Didn't rush me. Didn't speak. With trembling fingers, I opened to the final page. The signature line waited silently. So did my future. I uncapped the pen. For one long heartbeat, I wondered whether I was about to save my life or surrender it forever. The sound of my pen touching the paper was almost silent. Somehow, it echoed louder than every decision I had ever made. My signature looked smaller than usual. Emily Brooks. Just 2 words. Yet the moment the ink dried, my ordinary life quietly disappeared. I looked up. Damian didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply closed the folder with careful hands, as though he understood that I had given him something far more valuable than a signature. You still have time to change your mind, he said. I already signed. The ceremony isn't until tomorrow. I frowned. Ceremony? Our marriage license. Tomorrow? You preferred honesty. He nodded once. So I'm giving you the entire truth. Everything about him moved differently from everyone else. No wasted gestures. No unnecessary words. Every sentence sounded as though it had been considered long before he spoke it. When do I move? Only after your mother's surgery. I blinked. You planned that too? I planned around what matters to you. That answer unsettled me more than if he had admitted to controlling everything. The next morning passed inside a blur of hospital hallways. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the air while nurses wheeled my mother toward the operating room. She squeezed my hand tightly. You look terrified. I am. For me? I hesitated. For everything. She smiled with surprising peace. Life changes whether we're ready or not. Then she looked into my eyes. If he protects your heart the way he protected mine. She gently kissed my forehead. Don't punish him for arriving in an unusual way. The operating room doors closed. I stood there long after they disappeared. Nearly 4 hours later, Dr. Reynolds finally emerged. The procedure was successful. The relief hit so suddenly that my knees almost gave out. I covered my face with both hands before realizing someone was standing beside me. Damian. He hadn't interrupted. Hadn't spoken. He had simply waited. You stayed? There was nowhere more important. No bouquet. No dramatic speech. Just quiet presence. For reasons I couldn't explain. That meant more. Late that afternoon, we drove toward the city courthouse. The black SUV glided through Manhattan traffic while skyscrapers reflected the golden light of sunset. Neither of us spoke much. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt respectful. When we arrived, 2 attorneys, a judge, and Damian's assistant were already waiting. No reporters. No photographers. No extravagant decorations. Just polished wooden walls and a room that smelled faintly of old books. The judge smiled warmly. I've performed thousands of weddings. He looked between us. I've never seen 2 people look so nervous. I couldn't help laughing. Even Damian's lips curved slightly. The ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. We repeated the vows. Exchanged simple platinum rings. Signed another document. And suddenly, Emily Brooks no longer existed on paper. I had become Emily Carter. The name felt unfamiliar. Almost borrowed. As we stepped outside,